Hello everyone and welcome back to the last leg of the FIDE Grand Prix. It's Dmitry Andreikin versus Maxime Vachier Lagrave. Andreikin defeated, in the first round, he defeated Shahriar Mamedyarov, and Maxime Vachier Lagrave defeated Veselin Topalov. So the two of the classical games between the two of them have been drawn, and this is the first game of the Rapids. Andreikin has the white pieces, and we do have a nice photo of this matchup. There you have it, Andreikin celebrating his great position over Maxime Vachier Lagrave, or maybe he isn't. We'll just have to wait and see. Also, the photo is courtesy of official photographer Niki Riga. So there you have it. Now let's enjoy the game. Andreikin with the white pieces opens with e4. We have c5. Maxime, of course, goes for his Sicilian defense. We have knight to c3. Andreikin goes for the closed Sicilian, and now d6. We have knight g to e2. And now knight to f6. We have h3 and e5 now, so really a closed position, and d3. There is one game in the database where g3 was played, but with the d3 we have a completely new game as of move 5. So with knight to c6 by MVL, he continues development, and g4 now, preparing to dislodge the knight with g5. Bishop to e7, MVL is not bothered by that. We have bishop to g2 and now h5. So we have g5 advancing the pawn, knight to h7 putting pressure on g5, and now h4, just cementing that g5 pawn. And now you could continue this game in a variety of ways. For example, you could transfer the knight to f8 and then perhaps go to g6 or e6 depending on what white plays, but MVL immediately strikes in the center with f6. Now, is this one of the positions where it's okay to actually play f6? We'll also have to wait and see. So knight to d5, centralizing the knight, making room for the other knight on c3. F captures on g5, we have h captures on g5, and knight captures on g5. So MVL grabs the pawn here, and now knight e to c3. Andreikin says that his setup in the center is well worth the sacrificed pawn. So g6 as the h5 pawn is hanging, and now comes knight captures on e7. We have queen captures on e7 and knight to d5. Now the other knight takes the place of the previous knight. Queen back to d8, you have to guard the c7 square, and now f4. So you could go for e captures on f4. If bishop captures, get your knight to e5, have a very strong knight setup here. And then, for example, if captures, you get this position where it's a pretty nice position. Black has a variety of ways to play this. You can develop the bishop to g4. You can go knight e6 to f4, as f4 is nicely covered once you maybe castle or just bring the rook over to f8. So it is possible. But MVL decides to go for knight to f7, which allows Andreikin to advance the pawn further. So f5. We have g captures on f5, which weakens the h5 pawn, e captures on f5, and now knight to d4. And here, for some reason, well, not for some reason, it's hard to decide on such a move, but bishop to e3 is played. You don't, Andreikin doesn't want this knight here on d4, where it can target the c2 pawn, because if you play something like rook captures on h5, rook captures, and queen captures, now you're not going to go after the c2 pawn because there's simply too much pressure around the black king. You're going to have to go back with knight captures on f5, and white will be much better here. But it's hard to decide for something like that in rapid game. If you go for knight captures on c2, then just king d1, you attack the knight, and now if you go after the rook, well, now you just get queen to g6, and it's going to be queen g6 or queen to h7 is just going to be a very hard position to play for black. So it's just with the knight being able to come to f6, you can push f6, you can go queen g8 check. It will be a completely winning position for white. However, also bishop to h6 if the king tries to block the queen's entrance to g8 is possible. So it's definitely the way to go, rook captures on h5. But it's a rapid game, you don't really have time to calculate what happens after all the trades and knight captures on c2. So bishop to e3, Andreikin wants to eliminate the knight from d4, and now bishop captures on f5 by Maxime. We have bishop captures on d4, and now not recapturing immediately, but first bishop to g4. Just a nice Zwischenzug with an attack on the queen. Bishop to f3, and now c captures on d4. eliminating the piece now. And here c4. It seems like you can grab some initiative with bishop captures on g4, but black will not recapture right away because first queen to a5 check is coming, which connects with the attack on the knight on d5. And now after c3, now you capture the bishop. If captures captures, now white doesn't have time to create anything here because the knight is under attack. You would have to first deal with that. Queen goes here. Now you can castle queenside and everything is perfectly fine for black. So you don't have this. First c4, now the knight is nicely protected. Bishop captures on g4 definitely is a threat. But now d captures on c3 en passant. We have b captures on c3 and queen to a5 now, putting pressure on the knight here. So if you capture the bishop, just queen captures on d5. We have rook to b1 by Andreikin, going after the b7 pawn, but now just knight to g5, here putting more pressure on the f3 bishop. And here, what you want to play is bishop captures on g4, and now allow queen captures on d5, which comes with an attack on the rook on h1, but now queen to a4 with check, queen, and now you have to block with the queen. If you play something like king f7, queen e7, then queen to d7 is very strong. It nicely connects with the bishop on g4. So here you would have to play something like queen c6, trade queens, and continue with this endgame. In some way, let's say rook b7, you cannot capture the bishop because the rook hangs, but now rook h7, black has this at his disposal. Now you capture on h5 with check, king d8, and now you continue playing this game. You're down a pawn, but your pieces are nicely placed, so should be very much playable. So after this knight to g5, bishop captures on g4 is best for Andreikin, but he goes for knight to f6 check. So king to f7, putting pressure on the knight here, and now you have problems, because if knight captures on g4, h captures, you get bishop captures on b7 first. You have to keep an eye on the rook on h1, so after rook captures on h1, bishop captures on h1, you get rook to h8, and now your bishop is under attack. If rook to b7 check, you just move the king, and now there are too many threats. This is a threat. Knight to f3 will be a threat in some lines. Rook captures on h1 is a threat, and here black is just completely winning. So it's impossible to go for this. We have castles now, putting the rook on the same file as the king, so it's not a problem. You don't lose a piece. Maxime, before grabbing the knight, goes a knight to h3 check, king h1, and now king captures on f6. We have bishop captures on g4 with a discovered check, winning back the piece. Now comes knight back to f4, just blocking check. Bishop to f3, getting the bishop out of harm's way, and now rook 8 to g8. And now it's going to be very hard for white to defend this with the black rooks being so active. We have rook captures on b7 with ideas of queen to b3 followed by queen to f7, but rook to g3 now. And already there are some very unpleasant threats here, well, if you just bring this rook over, for example, to g8, rook to h3 will be mate. So queen to b3, like I said, with the idea of reaching f7. So now rook h3 followed by rook to g8 is impossible because the queen also covers the g8 square. So first rook to f8, here Maxime blocks it, and now d4. So what do you play here? Yes, white is threatening to open up the position in front of your king, but there is still time. Queen a6, you threaten the rook on f1. And here, how do you play this? c4 was played by Andreikin, but this doesn't work because c4 prevents the white queen from reaching a very specific square that we already mentioned. So feel free to pause the video here and try to find why. Well, not why, but the best winning idea for black. Well, I give you a couple of seconds. So, for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on paying attention. Yes, when c4 was played, the queen no longer guards the g8 square, so rook to h3 is the move. But you have to look a little bit further. King to g1, now rook g8 check. King to f2, and now Maxime goes for the very nice rook to g2 check. Now if bishop captures, of course you lose the queen on b3. So king to e1 was played, but now queen to a5 with check. Now you cannot move the king. If you move the king, just queen d2 is mate. So rook to b4 was played, but now Maxime just played rook captures on a2, and it was in this position on move 36 that Dmitry Andreikin resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done here. Rook to a1 check is coming, whatever you do, let's say queen c3. You're still going to play rook a1 check, and after the king moves, now rook to h2 check. king g1, and now just queen to a2, and there is no good defense against queen to f2 mate. The rook will not be able to capture because the rook is pinned, and you don't really have any other. Yeah, you could prolong it a bit with check, but just king g5, black is going to ignore you. And if queen e3, preventing queen f2 mate, then you just get rook to g2 with check, king to h1, and rook captures on f1 with check. Queen has to block, and now either rook can capture and it will be mate. So of course this is only one of the lines, but Andreikin knows that it's over, so he resigns on move 36. So that's the game, the first game of the rapid tiebreaks between the two of them that finished, and the other game of the rapids ended in a draw, so MVL goes to the advances to the higher parts of the tournament. Andreikin is eliminated from the competition, and MVL will meet Jan Nepomniachtchi, who he will have to beat if he wants to grab a spot in the candidates tournament. So that's probably the next game we're going to cover. So, hope you will be ready for that. So yeah, that's the game. I do hope you enjoyed it. I would like to thank Volker Legrand, Tom Petrie, Daniel Silverberg, Tobin Nelson, and Nicolas Darvao Garnau for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing the coverage of the FIDE Grand Prix, continuing to check up on your wonderful suggestions, and whatever else happens in the chess world. And of course, do be a part of the subscribers video. It's going to be awesome. So thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.